foresee it's time to leave town. I can foresee it's time to leave town. I can really foresee that this town will go down. I foresee we're all gonna drown. I can foresee it's time to leave town. I can foresee it's time to leave town. I can really foresee that this town will go down. I foresee we're all gonna drown.
As promised, we turn our attention now to the B word, and I can reassure you that I am keeping a record of all the stories that we would be discussing regarding the reality of Brexit that is finally biting, as opposed to the myths and fantasies. Although, as we alluded to a moment ago, many of the purveyors of the myths and fantasies have now gone on to new pastures, which generally seem to involve being sceptical about lockdowns and encouraging more mingling and mixing, and therefore more death. So, you know, what's not to trust? A couple of people have gone a bit viral. And remember that we are now 25 days into post-Brexit Britain. 25 days. Daily Telegraph's already running editorials explaining why Brexit was Angela Merkel's fault. You don't blame victories on people, lads. You only blame disasters on people. How can it be Angela Merkel's fault? How can Angela Merkel be to blame if it's such a brilliant idea that you flogged to your readers for the best part of 3 decades? I do not know. One of the people who has caused something of a brouhaha on social media is Daniel Lambert, who runs a big wine importation company based in Wales, supplying retail, wholesale and the on-trade across the whole of the United Kingdom. And what I hope he doesn't mind me saying, what I particularly enjoyed about his thread was the detail. I'll just read you one. This is the second of 26. He's done 2 long threads on Twitter, but what I liked about this was the clear effort to really get across what he was going to have to do. Because I've said to you before, business people will get us out of some of the holes that we've dug for ourselves, because that is what they do. They look at the scenario, they look at the world, they look at the view in front of them, and they work out ways to make a quid. So regardless of how you voted, regardless of how you feel, his task, when he knew what was on the horizon, was to get ready. So, 6 months ago, my business started to prepare for Brexit. We obtained the following licences and accreditations just to maintain the status quo. Remember, this was supposed to get rid of red tape, but, as I say, we are where we are. So, an EORI number, an RORO badge for chief, a GBRC number, a GBWK number, and this is in addition to the ARWS and the DAN accounts that his company already had. 5 months, a lot of form filling, but on the 9th of December, he thought he was good to go. Daniel Lambert joins me on the line now. Is that about right? 9th of December, good to go?
We thought so, yeah.
What happened next?
Brexit. That's what happened next.
Well, at least you can still laugh. Tell me more.
Well, if you don't laugh, you cry, don't you?
Yes.
So,
welcome to my world.
Exactly that. So we came in, as it said in the first thread, on the 4th of January, all ready to go and face 2021. And, we found out that the importation system wasn't quite as we were expecting. It was completely unknown to a lot of producers, the forms that they needed to go and get hold of. It took nearly 2 weeks for them, in fact, to find out what they needed to do. And you have a lot of importers to date who still have not actually managed to get anything across the border.
And, I mean, you were not in the dark, as it were. You didn't sort of trust in the unicorns turning up, or simply believing in Brexit would somehow change the reality you were enduring. You had, to the best of your ability and knowledge, which is clearly considerable, you had got all your ducks in a row, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do we, Daniel, distinguish between what could be described as teething troubles and what could be described as a permanent and systemic change to business?
I mean, it's a fantastic question. And I mean, this is a very in-depth situation and conversation that is going to rumble on for a long time in my industry, for sure. But the first point is that the huge amount of paperwork that's now involved to do something that was so very, very straightforward beforehand has surprised everybody, both on this side of the channel and of course, the European side. Nobody really understood what was involved. Now, a lot of people on social media have said, well, we can import from other countries in America or Chile and all of these lovely places. We already actually import from third nation countries. So we're not unaware of what we need to do with the systems, which is why we put the systems in place. What we were unaware of was how complicated the system is to complete. One very senior person who deals with HMRC and filling these forms in was amazed that we had done it so quickly in 21 days to actually complete a form. They couldn't believe that we'd managed it.
21 days?
Yeah, 21 days to actually crack all the various codes to actually get the first declaration done correctly.
This is just for one cargo?
Yeah, that's just one shipment.
21 days to fill in the forms for one shipment and to defend yourself from any accusations of being dozy. Someone from HMRC was impressed by the speed with which you'd done this, and prior to January the 1st, am I right in thinking you would not have had to do anything at all?
Correct. That's exactly it. So,
holy moly.
So basically on the deal was done, as we all know, on the 24th of December. On the 24th of December, they agreed their deal. Now, obviously, it was Christmas Day the following day, and then Boxing Day, and then we had, obviously, the bank holiday weekend, etc. So HMRC themselves didn't actually put the coding into the chief system, which is the operating system that was created in the, interesting point. Nobody really knows when chief was created. It's either the 80s or the 90s. It's one of the two.
Right. And this is the system that was expected to take the strain that you described, despite not having been designed for a post-Brexit universe.
Absolutely, but we'll touch on that in a minute.
We will.
So by the time we had actually got to the point of actually putting the information into the system, we then found out the information we put in, which was correct.
Right.
HMRC had actually put in some coding errors which wouldn't allow the correct information to be accepted, because Chief is one of those fantastic systems whereby until you get all the buttons right and all the coding correct, you can't actually commit the document to HMRC. Error codes come up, and there are about 3,000 or 4,000 error codes that you can get.
It's worse than my dishwasher.
Yeah, it's quite something. And the language that's used is also, you have to be a computer genius to understand what the hell the coding actually means, which is why, again, unbeknown to us, the people that do this day in, day out, and have been for years, they actually use secondary software to overwrite onto the software, because the software that was originally created is so out of date that they realised it's impossible to use, so there's overwrite software to go on top of that. But we're not doing that. We're actually inputting directly into the old software. So that's why they were impressed. They were like, wow,
that you've done it like that. So then this is, I mean, I grant you might not have enormous faith in the ability of the people responsible to deliver what I'm about to describe, but this is fixable. You can change code, you can rewrite the rules, the code, as it were, and indeed you can deploy secondary software. So, albeit that you've been bombarded with red tape, it's red tape that you can cut through eventually.
Yeah, but at a cost, which is the thing that some people want to not talk about. But
you estimate about £1 per bottle for I won't suggest for a minute that you flog plonk, Daniel. So let us say mass market product, and about £1.50 or £2 for some of the higher end small batch wines.
So, exactly that. So let me take you through the process, because I think it's really, really important that people understand the process, because this conversation isn't about whether we should have remained or leave. This is not what this is about now.
We've left. This is your new reality that you're describing.
Precisely that. Yeah, exactly. We're now at the point where this is what we have to deal with, and nobody wants this to be a horrible experience. I'm sure that nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, do you know what, let's make this really horrible for everybody. I don't think anybody's saying that. but that's where we're at. So the actual experience that we're seeing now and the protocols that are needed to import previously from the EU were that you basically sent an order to a producer, he would fill in his paperwork and he would send it and it would arrive, and then we would clear it on the system, the EMCS system, which was a system jointly funded by all the European nations to create movements within the European Union. And a lot of people confuse the systems that we now have, which are imports. Before we had movements. Very, very fundamental difference.
Yes.
Now everything that we do in the UK is an import, and so therefore it attracts all the interest of Chief, because, as I say, Chief wasn't used before because it didn't have the trade deal that was agreed on the 24th of December, and that coding was only put into Chief on the 29th of December, only could be used for the first time by anybody anywhere on the 1st of January. That was the first time it could be used. But the paperwork that's involved now is that the same paperwork previously from the EU has to be used to get it to the French or Dutch or Belgian border to cross the channel. That's the first set of paperwork. They then now need an EX1. The EX1 document is the exit document that all European producers, or companies for that matter, will have to produce to be able to exit their wines so that they can clear it from the Chief system, from the EMCS system, so that they know that it's left the European Union. Then it has to arrive in the UK, and it depends whether it's under bond or whether it's in free circulation, but you then need the C88 document, which is the Chief system document. And if it's under bond, you then need the UK EMCS system to have a movement guarantee, which is another registration to get it from the port to your place of work, residence or bonded warehouse. So you can see from having one piece of paperwork to do it from anywhere in the 28 nation states to now having 5 pieces of paperwork to do exactly the same job. And each of these pieces of paperwork, each declaration has a cost. So the EMCS system is free for everybody in France of the wider community in Europe to use. That's what was the system and is still the system within the EU. The EX1 document can only be done by the freight forwarder, and they're charging €75 per go on one of those documents. And it's per set of paperwork, obviously. So if you try and do groupage, which is something that the wine trade is very, very fond of, where you'll have multiple products.
Got several in the same.
Yeah, exactly. Shipment. You've got several sets of different EADs, therefore you'll have €75 charged on each one of those documents. So the groupage system is effectively dead. That's not going to happen anymore. Then you have the declaration in the UK, which is another £75 there or thereabouts is the average price that the freight forwarders are charging for that. And then we haven't even touched on the logistics. Logistics, after them, all of those lovely hauliers having the misfortune to spend 5 days in a car park just outside Kent, they're not really enamoured to come back to the UK.
No, they're not. And we're already seeing this, aren't we? And exactly. the trucks are leaving empty as well. You've already made me late for the news, but I've understood almost all of what you've told me. I haven't understood all of it, which is kind of the point. This, of course, and I know that you're not... you've got no interest in the politics of it now, but I must point out a lot of people voted for a removal of red tape. That's what they were promised by various Brexiters. What does the light at the end of the tunnel look like? And I'm big enough to take it if you tell me that you worry that there isn't any.
Well, it's, again, a lot of people think this is just an EU issue. It isn't. Deep Sea is in the same sort of trouble that the EU is in terms of logistics. To give you an idea, we ship from California, as I've already said, as well as the rest of the world. We've just put in a new order from California, from our 3 suppliers out there. Our normal freight cost for a shipment from there for 3 pallets was last year was about £800. This year it's £1,600. It's doubled.
Very briefly, why is that? Why has the price gone up from a non-EU country? I know you've sort of explained, but just give me the idiot's version. Basically,
the ports are all congested with containers of stuff that can't be removed, and there's no space in Southampton, Tilbury or Felixstowe to actually dock in.
How long have you got, Daniel?
I can speak for hours.
No, I mean business-wise.
Business-wise, we stockpiled, and so we've got about another 3-4 weeks before we are getting to a point whereby we start to run out of stock.
And how many people do you employ?
5.
Are you going to be here this time next year?
We'll be we'll be here this time next year. It will be the consumer that pays for it.
We'll just be paying more for our wine. And you know, already I'm sure that the great patriots of Britain are lining up to describe wine as a metropolitan elite
Absolutely
libation and the great working class of Britain prefer drinking battery acid. But, this is
actually, that's not true anymore.
Well, I know
that's
it isn't. I know it, mate. This is Brexit.
Wine?
It doesn't have to be true, does it?
No, absolutely. Wine is actually now the UK's preferred drink.
Well, I can only wish you luck. Is there anything that you wanted to get on air? But I mean, we are 5 minutes late for the news, but I think this is the news, actually.
Indeed.
Is there anything you want to add? Anything else?
I think that the fault of this, when the chief system was due to be replaced back in 2009 by the government,
right.
2009, okay, they identified the chief wasn't fit for purpose anymore. We're 11 years on.
Yeah.
Still, it's not integrated into anybody's system. Still, the government, knowing Brexit was coming, knowing what was going to happen, knowing that it couldn't cope, have ploughed right ahead.
Here we are.
That's ineptitude at unprecedented levels from Gove and Johnson. Full stop. There's no debate.
I've got two thoughts. The first is, have you thought about moving into sovereignty rather than wine? You could start knocking out some sovereignty by the bottle. That apparently is a very intoxicating brew. And I mean, clearly you don't need this advice, but because despite the despair that you convey, you're clearly a very good-natured fellow. But I would caution you against getting high on your own supply, Daniel.
Well, we try not to.
Glad to hear it. Have a great day, and thank you. Thank you for just explaining it. So we've kind of waited. We've obviously been paying attention to events, but understandably there are bigger fish to fry, like Leicester University removing Chaucer from its English course. You've got to focus on the really big stories. I'm being sarcastic, in case you're wondering. Twitter reminds you, doesn't it, daily, that sometimes you need to point out that you're being sarcastic. However, if I'd helped flog Brexit and Boris Johnson to the country, I'd probably be talking about Leicester University not teaching Chaucer. I hate Chaucer. Day 25 of Brexit. That's my dossier of stories. So, just off the top of today's news, haggis. Illegal in Europe, reports the Daily Record, after Brexit export restrictions spark Burns night shortages. Export restrictions make it illegal for individuals to send or take haggis to the continent, even for personal consumption. Haggis makers say that they've seen direct mail order exports blocked at the border, with about 50% of parcels being rejected. Over the weekend, this was true. British businesses that export to the continent are being encouraged by government trade advisors to, wait for it, set up separate companies inside the EU in order to get around extra charges, paperwork and taxes resulting from Brexit. So it's going so brilliantly, the taking back of control, that tax-paying businesses in Britain are being encouraged to open up operations on the continent, including the Cheshire Cheese Company, who also went viral this weekend, and to the managing director of which we will be speaking shortly. But let's throw open the phone lines for you as well. Impacts. Call me, tell me. 0345 6060 973. We may return to coronavirus conversations, but how dispiriting it is to hear Daniel Lambert a moment ago, the vintner, describing essentially what John Shirley, the freight forwarder based in Dover, started telling us would happen about 3 or 4 years ago. So how is it impacting your business? MasterCard charges are to quintuple the fees that are used for any purchases you make from an EU-based company. If you shop with MasterCard, they are set to increase their fees more than 5-fold. You just heard of the increase in your wine that is on the way. You may not have heard of the woman living in France who was quoted a £2,012 shipping fee due to Brexit. That was the sum she was quoted to have her food order delivered to France from the UK. Do you know what she paid previously? £12. Now, this will improve. There's no earthly way that sending a basket of grub from the UK to France can indefinitely cost £2,012, but it was a £32.46 delivery of food, and she was quoted more than 160 times her usual delivery fee because the company said that its courier had ceased overseas deliveries and the high delivery cost was to deter customers from ordering outside the UK. We'll speak to the Cheshire Cheesemaker shortly. The head of the road haulage boss has said that the chaos at ports would be topping the news agenda in any other year. And it's not just the queues. It's the absence of trucks that's the problem. And the fact that so many of them are travelling empty. So, in the news today, up to half, this isn't in my archive. Why has this not been added to my archive? Why has this not been added to my archive? It would have made an even more satisfying thunk if we'd had this story there. Up to half of all lorries bringing goods into Britain are returning to Europe empty, as British companies put off resuming exports to the continent to avoid getting caught by new customs regulations. It's a lady who ordered a coat I was reading about 80 quid's worth of coat. No, 200 quid's worth of coat, 80 quid's worth of delivery fees. Some of this may well prove to be teething troubles. But remember, do you know, I was going to explain the reality of the Nissan announcement last week to you and the fact that it is the polar opposite of regulatory autonomy. But I don't know if I dare. I'm going to let you have another couple of days to labour under the delusion that the news from Nissan last week was proof that Brexit is a good idea. It's in many ways the polar opposite. The good news is that the automotive industry, by signing up to EU rules, actually is going to be better protected than, for example, the food and drink industry or the fishing industry. So, I mean, genuinely, if you had to make a list right now of what you were expecting to have happened, the so-called benefits, as it were, the tangibles, the wins, the victories, you got John Redwood calling for you to grow more of your own food. Tell your local supermarket, writes John Redwood, a real person, never mind a politician. Tell your local supermarket we want more UK produce. I am pressing the government to get behind our farmers and fishing industry. Not much choice of UK cheeses, fruit and veg in some shops. Where is he shopping? Also, what's he shopping for? I shall be buying my pineapples from Leicestershire henceforth. And on it goes. But this was the little list I put together at the weekend. I don't know whether you'd add to it. There is more red tape, as Daniel just demonstrated fairly expertly. I've texted Daniel, by the way. I've asked him to keep in touch, and I've stressed that I want him to get in touch with me straight away if any good news appears on the horizon. And by good news, I mean things getting less bad. I don't mean things getting better than they were before, because I think 25 days into Brexit, we can now at least all agree nothing's going to get better. But just suck on that sovereignty. Like a lovely lollipop. There is more red tape. The fishermen are worse off. Do you remember June in Lowestoft? She went viral at the weekend. She's got no fish now. Still not ready to blame it on the people that thought Brexit was going to be a good idea. I lost track of who she was blaming it on, but I did find the call we took from her in 2018 when I very politely explained what was going to happen. Now it's happening. Still not quite ready, I don't think, to... And she ended up an MEP for Farage's outfit. So the fishermen are worse off. There is no frictionless trade. There is a border in the Irish Sea. America is not coming to the rescue. And the Vote Leave government is now delivering the worst COVID death rate and one of the deepest recessions in the world. And apparently this is his best. I've got rants coming out my ears today. I do apologise. I might take some calls after this. We will stay with this until 1, I think, because there is something of an appetite to start talking about the reality now that Brexit is 25 days old. Daily Telegraph are already, and I quote, blaming it on Angela Merkel, which is remarkable because you only blame disasters on people, not sunlit uplands. Since when did you have to blame someone for being able to have your cake and eat it? How bizarre. And as ever, most of the British media is still failing to do its duty by you, in some cases because they're cowed by fear of what the government might do to them, not mentioning any names, the BBC, and in most commercial cases because they helped sell you Brexit, and the last thing they're going to do is say sorry or admit that they made a terrible mistake. Luckily, I'm here. 11:53 is the time. So is Simon Spurrell, who is the founder and the chief executive officer of the Cheshire Cheese Company and the Hartington Creamery, and who, like my last guest, Daniel, is not here to talk about politics. He's here to talk about his business, which, it was reported this weekend, is set to transfer £1 million worth of investment that was earmarked for Macclesfield and will now instead be spent in France. We should begin by making sure the media have got this right, Simon. Is that an accurate reflection of your current situation?
No. I thought there's been a slight misquote on that one. What I actually said was that we've been left in a situation that means that we have no other possible solution other than investing in a fulfilment centre in France, not moving our entire operation over there. It is very true that we do have, and still have in planning permission at the moment, an investment in a new fulfilment centre, because we've outgrown the one that we have at the moment in Macclesfield, in my hometown. So that part is true. There's just been a bit of a mix-up there, which has caused...
So it's not either or. So the new fulfilment centre in France becomes a necessity to keep your business booming as of January the 1st. You didn't need it before January the 1st. No,
exactly. Now, the simple reason for this is, I'll sort of try and summarise it, so because it is quite long-winded and painful, is that when we came back after the Christmas break there, we started sending parcels to EU consumers. So this is consumers, by the way, not wholesale. This is a completely and utterly different issue.
Yes.
So we sent them, and they came back again, which was very, very expensive for us, because, of course, we pay for the journey there, we pay for the journey back, and then we throw the cheese in the bin, refund the customer, and lose the customer in the EU. So the DHL, DPD couldn't actually tell us what exactly was the reasons for these parcels coming back again.
Right.
I got in touch with my local MP, DEFRA, NFU. They genuinely couldn't actually understand this either, actually. So it's been up to myself, really, to actually go through this quite painful journey to find out what was the reason behind this rejection of parcels. And it was DHL only last Monday finally came back and said, this list will probably help, which was a list of all 26 countries and their prohibitions for animal foodstuffs being imported into the EU in each country. So the prohibitions surround the requirement to have a veterinary surgeon health certificate with every animal stuff product, cow's milk in particular, being ours, of course. But this affects meat, seafood, into the country, which isn't, we can just about cope with that with wholesale. We're used to that. We ship to Canada, ship to USA.
Because of the economies of scale.
Exactly.
Of course.
But the requirement is now that there's a health certificate required with, Francois or in France.
Every single truckle, must be certificated. And you, I think, are currently working on the presumption, because, of course, in the absence of a proper explanation, anything can move into the vacuum that's created. But you think they just signed up without noticing this or without realising this?
Yeah, I think this again, I'm having to sort of tease my way through this there and actually research this myself to find out what's going on, because once again, absolute silence from the people that should know about this. Now, we ship to the USA and Canada in wholesale. We provide health certificates. We can also send to the consumer market parcels of cheese to the USA, Canada, and other countries not in the EU.
Right.
So we don't need a health certificate, and we've been successfully shipping to the USA
because they've got lower. Years. I mean, to make it really simplistic, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but because they've got lower food standards than the EU.
You've just nailed it. Now, what did we do in October 2020? It was the whip was used, and the majority to force through to stop us being aligned with the EU food standards. Yes. Something we've been actually aligned with since 2002. So.
And that's why. So because we have passed legislation to reject alignment with EU food standards, they are going to treat us like a third country. And we helped write the rules on how third countries get treated, and you're now experiencing the reality of that.
Exactly. And there doesn't actually seem to be any way around this. I mean, I was on BBC Sunday Politics asked the same question.
All right, mate. I don't start flogging Stilton when you're on my show, do I?
My point was, the MPs were asked the question and they were absolutely stumped. They had no answer.
They just didn't have a clue, and yet they voted for it. And of course, they were telling us that they didn't need time to scrutinise the deal because it was also hunky-dory and was going to do exactly what it said on the tin.
Exactly.
So you... I don't know if you heard me speaking to Daniel Lambert earlier, who has been similarly had a similar response to you with his wine business, and again charged with trying to work all this stuff out for himself. And like him, you're someone that did your level best to get all your ducks in the row. But in a way, you've been mugged by a reality that even the people that sold not just Brexit, but this deal specifically, they were unaware of what they were selling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm desperate to not happen, but is being hijacked at the moment, is this being turned into a Brexit war with Remain seeing it as a way to score points and Leave being ultra defensive and blinded about it.
No, it doesn't help anybody, does it? We're out. We've done. It's gone. So we need to get businesses in as healthy a position as they can be. I will reserve the right to point out you're never going to be better off than you were before. You're just now seeking to limit damage. But you're right. We don't want to relitigate the referendum.
Yeah.
But you are owed an apology by the people who persuaded half of the country that red tape was going to be abolished and businesses were going to boom as a result of this. You now need to open a fulfillment centre in France so that you can do massive shipments to the fulfillment centre and then send out your individual customer orders from there.
Correct.
And that way.
Yeah.
So have you seen how the Daily Express has reported this?
No, I haven't actually.
This is, and I got to tell you, Simon, I had to double check that this wasn't one of those parody websites. So the Daily Express reports this as UK creates clever ploy to help British businesses avoid crippling EU red tape. British firms have been told to set up shop in Europe to make it easier to export their products and avoid the crippling bureaucracy of the EU.
Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So I mean, I've left the UK as a citizen, and I'm being encouraged by DEFRA, who also told me to do this, by DEFRA to rejoin the EU via my business at the moment, which that helps nobody. I mean,
I know.
One of the other things that is quite disturbing is that I was talking to DEFRA, and they said, well, if it's any consolation, at the moment, you realise, because I said to them, there is no reciprocal arrangement, so at the moment, EU businesses can ship into the UK without any restrictions whatsoever. That was a 6-month agreement.
Yeah.
He said, but in July, we'll have a reciprocal arrangement, and that means that they won't be able to ship to the UK. So all that does is now reduce the freedom of choice for the consumer, both in the UK and the EU. Doesn't actually make anything better. It just makes it worse for the mass population.
And I suppose that in them, that there is a mindset out there that says, I don't care about what happens to me as long as things get worse for them over there or for the other lot. And I know you're not playing any of these games, and I know also that the Department of International Trade has said it's not government policy to do what you describe, but this is what they told you to do. Because what's the alternative? I mean, genuinely, what's the alternative? Is that you just bid au revoir to all of those customers in continental Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I took the stance that I'm a positive person, and I lead in a positive way, and so I want to do best for the growing business. We had a fantastic year on our online business. We've got wholesale online.
Yeah.
So I wanted to. So 18 months ago, we invested in a German language and a French language version of our website. So nobody can say that I wasn't thinking ahead to the future if I'd done that. We had an Italian one planned, a Spanish one planned, and we've made good strides. 20% of our turnover had become EU parcels.
Yes.
And all of a sudden,
they pulled the rug from underneath.
All I want is what I had before back.
Well, that, of course, in the context of Nissan we saw last week, that counts as a win now, things staying exactly the same as they were before. When will the new outfit in France be up and running, do you think?
It's too early to say. I mean, what we have to now find is a partner to help us do this. We have a product line of about 400 items because we do gifts as well. We'd have to replicate all of this. We'll have to replicate every packing device we have, the method of checking.
Oh my days! I didn't realise it was. I thought it was just a big warehouse and a forklift truck. You've made me late for the news, but again, thank you for the detail. Will you keep in touch and do let us know if you get any good news, because I'd love to share that with people.
I would. Nobody would like good news better than me. Believe me.
I believe it. Simon, would you allow me to say bon chance?
Yes.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. We've spoken to two businessmen who achieved some unwanted prominence over the last few days on social media and then, of course, beyond, because of what Brexit has done to their businesses. And I guess the grim conclusion is that the best they can now hope for, and it's probably a forlorn hope, is that they'll get back to how things were before. I don't know anyone really clinging to the notion that anything is going to get better, which is incredible, right? I mean, genuinely incredible, unless, of course, you were listening to this programme over the course of the last 4 years, in which case you'll still be fairly shocked by reality. But, and I hope this makes sense, you won't be surprised, because you were told, I was told this was going to happen by people who knew of what they speak. And I'd throw open the phone lines to anybody now. So early impact. Now, 25 days in, the Telegraph are already blaming it on Angela Merkel. 0345, and most of the headbangers have moved on from the European research group to the COVID recovery group. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Some of it will be relatively low level, but this one intrigues me because I do, when I say stuff to you, and I'm about to do it again, I always, and if this ever stops, I think I'll have to leave. I always have a voice in my head just warning me not to overstep the mark, and sometimes I probably do, but don't oversell it. So you may remember that my wife ordered something from Australia, some makeup. I think it was a mascara. And we got one of those notes through the letterbox telling us that we had to go to the post office to pay. And I said to you, and I did a tiny bit of research before because I didn't want to make a complete fool of myself on the radio. I said to you, is that, are we going to have to do that with all the European Union countries after Brexit? And I guess because I was such a sceptic of Brexit, I guarded against going in too hard on that because obviously I didn't want it to happen. And there's a really hard tightrope to walk between warning about things and now describing things and actually really hating the fact that it's true. So I said to you a few times, I just worry that we might be sort of sleepwalking into some of these scenarios, including one where stuff that currently drops through our letterbox in exactly the same way, regardless of whether it started its journey in Birmingham or Barcelona, the stuff coming in from Barcelona might end up subject to the same sort of fees and charges that Mrs. O'Brien got hit with unexpectedly. And we only remembered it because I think the charges were more than the mascara. So it was, one of those situations that seemed unbelievable to those of us who only ever knew life under the European Union rules. And this is from Poppy. It says, I had my first Brexit dividend yesterday. My wife bought something from Germany. FedEx have billed us £65 in fees, duty and VAT before it can be delivered, which seems to be the Germanic equivalent of my Australian mascara warning. And my correspondent concludes, but we do have our sovereignty and happy fish. Jan is in Alicante. Jan, what can you tell us?
Hello there.
Hello.
I've spoken to you on this subject before, James.
Well, you've spoken to me about what was on the horizon. Now you're telling me what's actually happening.
Well, the thing was, I think the only people who knew what was actually going to happen were the people in the logistics freight forwarding agency, because years ago, this is what used to happen then.
Yeah.
But then it was more complicated because everything was typed on a typewriter by hand, so it even took longer. So really, nothing has changed. It's just gone back to how it was before we were in the EU.
Which was considerably more complicated.
Memories.
Yeah.
A lot of people have died, so they've forgotten it. The people now that have been brought up in the past 40-odd years have never known anything different. So this is why it's a shock to the system. I think the only place there's going to be jobs is in customs and freight forwarding, because they're going to need so many people.
And the weird thing was...
I'm not a company, I'm not anything, but there's a lot of Facebook pages and things here with people exactly saying what you've said. I ordered this and I've had to pay this and that and the other.
Yeah.
And they're all blaming it on the EU and because it's the EU's rules and regulations.
Which
but
we
it's
wrote.
Not. It's the rules and regulations of the whole world of importing and exporting.
We wrote the rules on how the European Union treats third countries, and then we voted to become a third country, and now we are complaining about the rules that have to be abided by under EU rules by third countries. I mean, it's if it wasn't Brexit and we hadn't had so much experience of this already, it would be almost unbelievably embarrassing for this to be our national pageant. We wrote the blinking rules, and now we're complaining about having to follow them.
Yeah. The only way round it, I think, is going to be easier if someone can find a loophole. Because at the moment, everyone's not sure of what's going on because it's new to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, and also a lot of customs and agents over here are not reading it as it is. It's sort of lost in translation type thing. And so So people don't really know what they're doing. I mean, like with the sandwich, you're not allowed to take a sandwich abroad and things like that.
Meat
Really
products. Well, it'd be the same rule.
In case they get told off by their bosses, I think.
Yeah, and things will get better, but they're never going to get better than they were before. The thing I found odd, Jan, and I hold you personally responsible for this failure, Jan. Because whenever I heard people saying, well, we traded perfectly well with the European Union before we joined, or with Europe before we joined the common market, and I always, and I was one when we joined the common market, so I wasn't fully qualified to comment, but there was a large part of me that thought, why did Margaret Thatcher get so excited about the single market if leaving it was not going to be a big deal? And usually the kind of people that I find myself at odds with politically are largely fully paid up members of the Margaret Thatcher fan club. So 2020 hindsight is a wonderful thing. But if the single market, if leaving the single market would be a piece of cake, why the hell was Margaret Thatcher so fond of it?
Yeah.
And now we're finding out, because you're telling us we're going back to what things were like in 1971, and compared to what things were like in 2020, it's rubbish.
Yeah, it's worse now because there's so many more people. The world's a bigger place. Europe's a bigger place. Yep. And there's so many companies set up now. I mean, in the old days, when the computer system for customs first started and there wasn't that many things being entered it was still going down every week. We still had to, couldn't do any imports for 2 or 3 days. And you had containers on the quays, couldn't get delivered. There was people paying storage. It was horrendous then. And for it not to be updated for Brexit, they must have known what was going to happen.
I don't think they did. I listen, I've said this before, and I always say it with, the traditional combination of hoping that I'm wrong and not quite being able to believe that I'm right. But it's all about just getting through the news cycle. Christmas Eve, they were setting off their party poppers. Christmas Eve, that's a month ago to the day. Well, 25th today, 24th, give or take. Hashtag fake news. But they were trying to, and they're still at it now. The idea that there would be anything to celebrate once reality bites is completely at odds with the noises they were making when they announced it all. Best case scenario, you think, would be finding a loophole.
Well, that's the only way, really.
But then they'll close it.
If they sort of close their eyes to some things, but people don't realise it is very, very time-consuming. It's very, very hard.
And that's the cost. And that cost, as Daniel explained, the vintner, that cost just simply gets passed along to us. So, yes, you will still be able to do business. Yes, many companies hopefully will stay afloat, but they will be passing the increased costs on to the consumer, which means everything's going to cost more money.
The only thing to be thankful of, there's no duty on anything. I mean, if they went to all the other countries in the world, the way imports and exports are done for the third countries, there'd be duty on things as well, and that it would skyrocket. People just wouldn't be bothered to buy anything.
No, I understand. I think I understand. I mean, it's not exactly a call for celebration. It's just an indication of how things could have been even worse. Jan, thank you. I was joking, of course. I don't hold you personally responsible for the failure of the older generations not to understand that being in the single market was a very big deal. So all of the people who said, well, we were perfectly capable of trading with that before. Yeah, but that's a bit like, it's a bit like saying we were perfectly capable of walking before. After you voted to send your Maserati to the breaker's yard. 16 minutes after 12. That wasn't my best analogy ever. Actually, I'll work on it a little bit while you enjoy these words. I've been to analogy surgery. My thanks to Pinky for this prescription. He writes, it's like saying we were perfectly capable of walking before footwear was invented, James. But wearing footwear makes it so much easier to walk across all terrain. That's what it is, isn't it? We were perfectly capable of trading with the continent before we joined the common market. Yeah. Cool. We're perfectly capable of walking before shoes were invented, so let's abolish shoes. Same logic. Decent analogy. There's another one here as well. I like this. We were perfectly able to entertain ourselves before television was invented, so let's abolish television. That is the argument. Jan laid it out perfectly, I think. Oh, boy. Where does it go next? I do not know. And I can't do this indefinitely. There is no rejoin. There is no remain lobby. There's no political representation either yet. I don't know quite what Keir Starmer's game is, but He won't be able to ignore the mounting evidence of people's lives getting worse, people's shopping getting more expensive, people's freedoms being abolished, while all being sold to the British public as a win. And the Nissan stuff, which I'm not going to explain to you today, because I even if you are, not very nice, and you sort of delude yourself into thinking there are wins out there. Nissan staying exactly the same as it was before is not a win, but it's worse than that. If you dig into the question of regulatory alignment, you'll understand why the car industry actually represents the opposite of leaving regulatory alignment. I hadn't understood this, but one of the early intellectuals of the Brexit movement has written an interesting piece on why what has happened at Nissan is the polar opposite of what many Brexit cheerleaders were claiming. But I'm going to let you have a couple more days clinging to the notion that that was some sort of win, because, I'm compassionate, I care, it must be awful to be going, yeah, it was a great idea. Look, there's one car company that's staying exactly as it was before. I think, and I appreciate that I sometimes fail to guard against the smugness or the I told you so, but I swear upon all that I hold holy, there's no triumphalism here, no celebration. It's the worst possible thing. I live here, for heaven's sake. It's my country. My children are going to grow up here, hopefully. But, you have to say that shafting the fishing industry, if you needed more evidence, literally all they had left was fish. And now they're worse off than they were before. Anyway, early impacts. Vic's in Sherborne. Vic, what have you got?
Good morning.
Hello.
Yes, I'm just I don't think who cares, but a lot of British people, I'm sure, are not aware that when we left the EU on the 1st of Jan, we also left an organisation called EASA, which is the European Aviation Safety Agency.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And which we helped to set up about 25 years ago, but there you go.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing, isn't it? Is that we were the architects of all of this stuff that we've now abandoned.
We were, that's right. There are 31 member states in it, so
right.
That's the EU 27 plus the usual sensible countries like Iceland, Norway, and Switzerland. But we have elected on Jan 1st to pull out.
Now, what does that mean?
Well, that means now that on a practical person, as a licensed aircraft engineer that I am,
yes,
I could have signed the certificate of release to service on any aeroplane all over the world, and certainly within the member states of the EU, but also other world countries that have bilateral agreements with EASA, and that's more than half the world.
Well, we might. That could be something they can fix, but that's no consolation now. So, in other words, your professional qualifications have been rendered worthless in a ton of countries where up until New Year's Eve they were as valid as they are here.
You're absolutely right. And as of we become a third country,
yep.
Is that term again?
Yep.
I heard you mention that earlier on.
You did.
Reference other subjects. We are now a third country, and we've and for
what? For why?
Within the 31 member states, there's also more than half the world have adopted the EASA system. More than half the world.
It's no consolation in the short term, but presumably we will go back into it, will we? Or
No. We've officially pulled out of it, as Mr. Schnaps and his boys. Grant Schnaps or
Schnaps. makes me reach for the Schnaps. But they don't. And if you said to them, if in the unlikely event of a cabinet minister agreeing to talk to us, and you said, why have they done this? What do you think they'd say? What's the win?
I actually don't know. I think it's going back to the past that we want our CAA to be a regulatory authority of an aircraft industry we no longer have.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. I mean, there is only about, as far as regulatory authorities for aircraft manufacturers, there's basically the EU for Airbus,
right,
and
America.
other countries, and
Boeing.
the FAA for Mr. Boeing, the other side.
So I read that phrase.
Canadians and the Brazilians also.
Okay, you know your stuff. I've read that phrase a few times, that they've made my professional qualifications worthless in 28 countries or 31 countries or 50 countries, and I hadn't fully understood what it meant. But you've highlighted that perfectly. As an aircraft engineer, you could. I mean, freedom of movement of labour is one thing, but of course, equality of qualification is another. It's part of freedom of movement of labour. It means that an aircraft engineer anywhere in the single market, his qualifications hold. So, if you see Grant Shapps anytime soon, or does he do phone-ins to here? I might start ringing into some of these phone-ins. Why have they done that then, lads? 0345 606 0973, 27 minutes after 12. Martin's in Willesden. Martin, what would you like to say?
What I'm about to say is that over the last I've been in business for over 40 years. Our business is in the world of kind of rock and roll and event touring.
Right.
We've been touring the world, I would say mainly Europe.
Yeah.
And since we were a member of the EU, other than going to Switzerland and the Scandinavian countries, our business has been pretty simple when we go through country to country. And now, of course, what is happening is that although we haven't had any experience of what is going to happen because there hasn't been.
I'm just going to see if we can do anything about your phone line, Martin, because I know the events industry is feeling particularly bruised at the moment, and I want to make sure I pick up every syllable. I like this from Paul, who's texted in to say that Johnson reminds me of a line in Game of Thrones. He would gladly see the country burn as long as he's crowned King of the Ashes. Sounds about right. So I do want to get that chat back because the events industry is very, very relevant to this. Harry is in Croydon. I've only got about 90 seconds, Harry. Can you make your point?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you,
good morning, James. By
Hello.
The way.
Hey.
So I work for a globally recognised branded courier company.
Yes.
We're one of the only ones that collects levies for goods that come from outside the UK.
Right.
And this is becoming quite a regular and typical occurrence now. I delivered a mat, I think it was worth £65, and the import on it was £212. And the lady I delivered it to was totally shocked, nearly had a heart attack, as you can imagine. And this is becoming quite a regular occurrence now.
And is that a temporary teething trouble, or is that a necessary and inevitable consequence of the current trading arrangements that kicked in on January the 1st?
I could only presume it's the latter. I would like to think it's...
So would I. Everyone would like to think it's the former. It's still a disaster. It's still a failure. It's still a misselling of Brexit. But if it's temporary, that's better than permanent. Full stop.
Yeah, but we are the messengers, unfortunately, and we're getting it in the neck from the consumers who are ordering things.
I bet you are. It's all your fault. A pal of mine is a greengrocer, and he was knocking out some strawberries at the weekend, and a customer who he happened to know had voted for Brexit complained that it was an extortionate price for a punnet of strawberries, and that is the inevitable consequence. It will be the people in the front line that get the blame from others, which is why I have to carry on doing what I do, because if you are going to be hit by something, regardless of how you voted, whether you fell for the lies of Farage and his mob, or whether you didn't. And maybe they didn't even realise they were lying. Maybe it was just a failure of intelligence. Doesn't matter anymore. I don't care. I just want you to know what you need to know moving forward. And if you know what you need to know moving forward, you won't blame people like Harry for the consequences of, well, what was until relatively recently referred to as the will of the people. It's 25 to 1. Gino writes, I've tried calling into LBC for James's Brexit phone-in, but the phone lines have collapsed, a bit like the Brexit promises. Gino, try again. Always be patient, and it will be rewarded. If at first you don't succeed, try and try again. That's what Martin in Willesden has done. We've moved him to FaceTime Live, or whatever it's called, in order to ensure the quality of the phone line. So we are... Well, I like to think I'm in the rock and roll business as well, Martin. Sadly, I'm not, actually, but you truly are. How is this going to affect you? How are you already being affected, and what does the future look like?
Well, interestingly enough, we are currently on our touring side. We're not affected at all because there are no tours.
Well, this is true.
Our last live event was last February, which was at the O2. But previously to that, our business entails the world of moving around from city to city, country to country, without too much problem. Occasionally, when you go to Switzerland or Scandinavia, you had to make sure that everything was in order, paperwork, taxes, etc., were logged in.
But not within with the European Union itself.
Absolutely not. No. Obviously, it takes me back 40 odd years, where we had to stop at borders. We had to go through people opening trucks and looking at paperwork. Of course, since the systems have changed and everything's computerized, moving around was much easier. But I've been vehemently anti leaving the common market for the last 2 or 3 years. And even now, we still do not have 100% details of what is going to happen in our industry when it comes to moving around and giving concerts from one day to the next.
So when this infernal virus is, please God, under some sort of control, and you and many other people in your sector particularly, but in many, many other sectors as well, start trying to rebuild their businesses post-COVID, post-lockdown, you have no idea, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but listening to you, you don't know whether you'll even be able to.
Well, we do have an ideas,
right?
But we haven't got the actual experience of what's going to happen because of what's been going on in the last year. And funny enough, you mentioned the name, I didn't catch his first name, but his surname was Shirley.
John Shirley runs Shirley Freight Forwarding in Dover. He was warning.
His family, which I presume is Edwin Shirley trucking and all that lot.
No, I don't think it is actually. But don't know. I think John. He's got an Australian twang to his voice. I think he's a self-starter. But anyway, never mind.
Well, anyway, that family name has been in our industry for as long as I have, and that's what their industry was, whether it's the same person or not. Name.
Maybe it is. I don't know.
So what it's going to mean, of course, now our online business, I just heard somebody earlier mentioning about taxes and extra freight costs being added on when the delivery guy knocks on the door. This is obviously happening in our industry now. If somebody in Germany orders a T-shirt, or the other way around, they're going to get a bill for extra taxes and extra freight when it comes in. So everybody who's used to spending money going to concerts certainly can look forward to be spending more money on very high ticket prices any rate, and probably for all the associated areas to do with it.
This is going to sound facetious. I promise you. I promise you that it isn't. But any upsides, any pluses that you can think of?
No. Well, the only thing's good for the EU countries that we have set up our own European companies to handle any problems that may occur. So
you have already, because these are the two stories today that are very much filed under you couldn't make it up. The first is the Telegraph blaming Brexit on Angela Merkel 25 days in, when it was supposed to be something worth celebrating, not blaming. And the second is the Daily Express claiming that setting up a business in the European Union is a wizard ruse to help you avoid all the European Union. So literally spending money you didn't have to spend, paying taxes in a country where you didn't have to pay taxes, is being sold by the Daily Express, the Brexit cheerleaders, as some sort of clever ruse.
Well, it's not a ruse, it's a necessity. But the difference is where we would for instance, we need to print 10,000 T-shirts to take out on the road with an artist. We would print them locally, put them on a truck and move them around. So obviously now that part of the industry will go elsewhere.
You're going to commission the T-shirts in each individual city, probably.
Correct. It might go to Poland, it might go to Germany, or wherever, And
but this is like, what's it like? It's like you scratch the surface of something, and then all the other things come into focus. So all merch, as the kids call it, is you would just load up a truck with merch and tour it all the way around Europe until you didn't have any left. And now you're going to order it separately, which is going to cost more because of economies of scale. And who's going to end up trousering the cost? You partly, but mainly the customer.
And the other problem, of course, let's say we run out of large and we need 1,000 large to be in Berlin tomorrow, which we can print overnight and can get there the next day or the day after. That now will be impossible. It will not happen. So we have to look at moving all our production where necessary into the European market, which is great for them.
Have you thought about maybe flogging sovereignty at the end of concerts instead of T-shirts? That might no.
Well, what do you mean by that? Sorry, sovereignty. You mean?
Sovereignty. It's all about sovereignty. We've got sovereignty. We've lost all the other stuff, but we've got sovereignty. You could slice it up a bit, knock it out.
We could do. Yeah, we could put
bit of sovereignty.
Iron Maiden on it or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Iron Maiden branded sovereignty. That's what we were. You couldn't make it up, could you?
You can't make it up.
I know.
And the important thing to just emphasise, we have no experience of what is going to happen. We can't say to you, this is what's happened, because we haven't been touring for a year.
Oh boy, and yeah, well, I've said good luck a few times today, or bonne chance, and I say it to you as well, Martin. But oh boy, as I say, how do we do this? Because it must be awful for you if you're the kind of person that's been sending me really nasty abuse for the last 4 or 5 years. What are you doing now? How are you going to? I mean, carry on sending me really nasty abuse, of course. That's absolutely fine. But how are you coping with the fact that you've been lied to so completely by your heroes? And apropos nothing in particular, it's just been reported that Dominion Voting Systems, you'll remember this is the company that it was the centre of outrageous and entirely spurious claims that they'd somehow been involved in fraudulence during the American election. They've just announced that they're suing Rudio Giuliani. Oh no, that's the Go Compare guy. They're suing Rudy Giuliani for, wait for it, go on, have a guess. Keith, how much do you think? Higher. $1.3 billion. 12:42 is the time. Richard is in Chelmsford. Richard, early impacts, how are you getting on?
Oh, terrible.
Oh.
I started a beer import business in 2018, and I will just emphasise it's not the only job that I do. Everything was going fine. It was all simple. And obviously now we've got Brexit. And I tried to import some beer last week, which would normally take me 2 weeks and be really simple, like the other guy, the wine importer, said.
You mean 2 weeks from signing on the dotted line to it arriving in Chelmsford?
Yes, exactly.
Fair enough.
And that's all changed now, obviously. Last Wednesday, I spent probably 2 or 3 hours on the phone to the HRMC.
Yeah.
They didn't really know what they were doing. And at some points during the conversations, the phone went dead. And then I'd have to redial. But to cut a long story short, the company that I used to pay the duty to, and they forwarded it on to them, they now need to know what vessel it's going on, what's the truck number, and various other pieces of information which is impossible for me to give them. So what I've done, I've gone on to my logistics company, and they're going to try and import this beer next week. I've actually applied to defer the duty with one of the HRMC's online systems, which another thing is impossible to try.
I don't know if did you hear Daniel earlier, who ships in a shed load of wine from the continent, and so his problems are like yours times 100, aren't they?
Yeah, and he has, but he's going to use the chief system, which I've looked into that, and the software is just out of my league. The cost of that. It's
11 years out of date as well. But that's what I meant by the economies of scale. So what's going to happen? What are you going to do?
Well, I'm going to persevere.
Good.
And I've got enough to get me through another couple of months.
Enough beer?
Because the lockdown, I've probably got about 10 kegs that are going to go out of date soon, but that's another problem. And then just see how we get on.
Wait and see what shakes down in the future.
If it comes to it, I'll just give it up if it's too much aggravation.
Or if the costs become too high. And the weird thing is, Richard, that it seems to me that the bigger the business, the more likely it is to be able to weather this storm. So it's actually the entrepreneurs, the small business people, and that most big businesses started off as small businesses. So it seems to me that the more enormous your operation is, the more insulated you will be from some of these problems, or the more capable you will be of absorbing some of the cost and passing it on. But the smaller you are, the tougher it will be.
So this time I've just ordered 4 pallets of beer, and I just want to see because again, the cost is probably going to go up to the end user.
And if it goes
it's
up too
bound
much,
to.
people won't pay for it.
No, and beer, I mean, with respect to you, and I'll give you a free plug for the business in a moment, with respect to you, there is an astonishing array of beer available now without necessarily having to cast your net overseas. But, of course, choice is
Yeah.
choice is the key, isn't it? And you want to be able to have a variety of beers to choose from. Do you want to name the company? It's up to you entirely.
It's the Bavarian Beer Company, and we import beers from the Kornbacher Brewery.
Oh, well then, so you've just... And I'd put probably Pilsner Urquell in the Czech Republic on a similar list as well, the unpasteurised stuff that you could...
That's it.
So you can't get an equivalent. It's exceptional beer, which you can't get a British equivalent yet. And there's a reason why. The Bavarian brewing industry has spent hundreds of years perfecting its craft, hasn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
I wish you well. I really do. It'd be nice if everyone we've spoken to today was to send me free samples, because it'd be wine, cheese and beer we'd be looking at now, and a bunch of Iron Maiden T-shirts off Martin. Sorry to labour the point, but my goodness me, if you had to name two media outlets that had done more to flog Brexit than any others, the Telegraph and the Express would be up there, right? Obviously the Mail and the Sun have arguably done more. Actually, I don't know. Anyway, who cares? I mean, the point is it's done. It's sailed. But look at what they've been reduced to already. First of all, the Telegraph. Angela Merkel is more responsible for Brexit than any other political figure in Europe on either side of the channel. So, at first glance, I thought, blimey, that's very generous. They're giving Angela Merkel the credit for this massive victory that they're still celebrating. Because 25 days in, they can't possibly be trying to blame the thing that they wanted. I remember Boris Johnson was paid £250,000 a year by the Barclay brothers to write for that organ. They can't possibly be trying to blame Angela Merkel for Brexit, despite having spent 30 years campaigning for Brexit. But they are. It's unbelievable, that, actually, the idea that Angela Merkel is to blame for Brexit. Angela Merkel's disastrous legacy is Brexit. I thought Brexit was brilliant, lads. What are you on about? And then over to the Express, which, with a straight face, printed this. UK creates clever ploy to help British businesses avoid crippling EU red tape. British firms have been told to set up shop in Europe, i.e. to create jobs and pay taxes in Europe, to make it easier to export their products and avoid the crippling bureaucracy of the EU. It's not crippling bureaucracy if you're in the EU, lads. Who voted to leave? Them or us? Who actually wrote the rules governing how third countries must conduct trade with the European Union? Yeah, we did. A disproportionate amount of influence, according to many experts, over the single market legislation and other things, is why it is widely regarded as having been one of Margaret Thatcher's greatest achievements, the creation of the single market. So we wrote the rules, the EU rules. Sometimes with these little observations, I feel a temptation to turn them into rhyming couplets, but I won't start inflicting that upon you just yet. We wrote the EU rules which third countries must abide by. We then voted to become a third country. We are now moaning about the EU rules which third countries must abide by. We are an international laughingstock, and it's all entirely self-inflicted. But I fully understand if you're not ready to blame the people that sold it to you yet, and you're still blaming the people who described it to you. I get it from the other end as well, of course. The people who explained why Jeremy Corbyn was a useless leader of the Labour Party are responsible for Jeremy Corbyn being a useless leader of the Labour Party. The people who explain why Brexit was a truly stupid thing for a country to do are the reason why Brexit has turned out to be a truly stupid thing for the country to do. 25 days in. 25 days. And it's falling apart at the seams. And there's no way back. That's the ultimate, that's why we can't talk about it endlessly. We have to report the reality as it emerges, the news as it breaks, the stories as they develop. But there's no way back. And when generation hence they start making moves to rejoin, well, we won't be able to without adopting the single currency. And dancing, well, we won't enjoy the rebates. It is just unbelievable. And that's the justice, I'm afraid. I'd love to shut up about it, start talking about, I don't know, statues and street names. But I can't. Because the people that did this to you must be held to account. The people that turned you into this manipulated, quasi-xenophobic, anti-patriotic person, while all the time insisting you were the polar opposite of all these things, they turned you into someone who has harmed your country, your future, and your children's future. Now, I'm not going to hold you responsible for that. I'm going to hold them responsible. And I will carry on holding them responsible until I'm dragged kicking and screaming from this studio, which might be tomorrow. David's in Bath. David, how have you been hit?
Well, I mean, I haven't been hit too badly.
Good.
But I think other companies might be. So I'm a little bit more specialised. So I sell used guitars and effects, vintage used guitars and effects, basically.
Okay.
And so it's, given that it's a bit more specialised, I can probably just about absorb it, and I'd probably still have customers from Europe. But if I was selling widgets or something like that, which can easily be produced on both sides
so you
border.
sell stuff that people can't get anywhere else, in a way.
Exactly. So
Okay.
if you think about it, the US has the biggest amount of guitar and guitar stock naturally, because I've had so much guitar consumerism over the years. And the UK would be like the second place in the Western Hemisphere for that. The EU doesn't have quite so much of a tradition of it, so I'll still get people who will look for.
So you're like an online equivalent of Denmark Street or something like that. Some of the shops down there are collector's items.
Exactly, and it's all based on so it's all on online platforms. So I don't have my own website; I just sell on platforms.
Yes.
So eBay and the like. So just the simple act of clicking as an EU customer, clicking Europe as in your search criteria, suddenly we dropped out. So all UK sellers have dropped out.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Good grief, just like that, just overnight. You just removed from the platforms because...
Exactly. Well, not removed from the platform, but just removed from that search criteria. If you add the UK or add Europe...
I see, yes, because it's going to be a different regulatory framework that you sell under.
So there'll be European customers that actually won't even notice that your goods aren't on there.
Right.
However, they will find that there's less choice, so they might expand their search. But that's before they find that they're paying import charges, which is, well, if it's anything like here, it's 23% plus whatever the courier company's charging you.
Well, I mean, everywhere you turn. Tomorrow we might dedicate the entire programme to the positives and the companies that are doing better. That would be good. David, take care. Last one on this. I've only got a minute. Mina is in Enfield. Mina, what can you tell me?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Thank you for taking my call. And
welcome.
I just want to say a big thank you for bringing this up, because you are the only one at the moment that is actually got this right.
I don't know that I am. I'm probably just the loudest. But anyway, I'll take the compliments.
Yes,
thank you.
But you are actually saying the right things. I mean, this is a complete disaster. This is not a free trade agreement.
No.
I think Boris Johnson didn't even bother to read one page of the agreement before he signed it, and it's extremely disappointing. I sell clothes online on the different platforms, vintage clothes, handbags, shoes, and all of that to the rest of Europe. It's all gone now.
The whole business.
They're not going to buy anything from me. I haven't sold anything this month. And, and there are items that we can't even purchase from Europe, I've been told.
And is there light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, can you think of anything that might
I don't know.
things?
I'm just going to have to ship my business in Italy. That's it.
And there goes the tax. There goes the whatever it may be. Mina, I wish you well. Thank you.